Hello, everyone. I'm talking to another beautiful soul today, Nuaisi, and I'm very grateful to finally have this chat because we have been going back and forward, and today it's happening. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very intrigued by all the work that you have been doing, and I've been following you already for quite some time. And I think we both working with women empowerment. You already wrote a book. You're an author, and you're a teacher to transform trauma into sovereign power. Soulful purpose and sacred pleasure. And yeah, I think it's absolutely stunning what you're doing. So today we're going to dive deeper in some of these topics and specifically, yeah, the sacred sexuality and also the exploration of us as women and our own sexuality and pleasures, because that's still something we don't like to talk about. And there's a lot of taboo around it, but it's such an important um, aspects of also just being and enjoying and experiencing life. So first, I actually would like to learn a bit more about your own journey and how you yeah, got into this whole space, if you don't mind sharing that.
Sure. So, of course, I have been through initiation into this work from early childhood. Um, yeah, when it comes to my sexuality, I was sexually molested by my stepfather at a very young age, from when I was about 7 years old. And that messed up my sexuality in a very potent way. And the journey was to work through it, to heal it, and to bring it as that sacred power back online. And that was the journey that I went through, and from there started helping other women to also break through, if it's conditioning that we all experience from living in a society that sexuality has been dumped as sacred. It's been mutated in so many ways. I always say that our first teachers for everything, of course, but sexuality as well, which is, I really define sexuality much more than just sex. It is our life force energy, and our first models, our first teachers is our mother and father. And the way they mirrored sexuality to us is what we absorbed. And then there is the society that we grew up with in, and the culture. And this is what we wired in our beings. And from there, without any education, without any knowledge, we've been thrown to experience it under, closed doors and behind the, in a very, very unsupported way. So yeah, this is more in a nutshell my journey. Continue.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think that's also why I like your work so much. We have similar stories in that way. And I think the sexuality and sensuality specific in terms of working through sexual trauma as a child, if you experience it, it's such a big topic. And it's at the end of the journey that you start to click these things. And it's like, that you become completely comfortable in your own body again and can open up to everything that normally you had these walls around you because there was so much fear. Exactly what you were saying. Growing up, you had this whole wrong idea of what it should be or what you experienced. And I think even like for women who don't have that trauma, but I would like to hear from you about that as well. There's still so many blockages within when it comes to the sexuality. And what I'm learning working with people and specifically women as well, is that when there is sexual trauma, you actually you're coming faster to that point that you know there is an issue in the sexuality. But for the women who did not experience it or do not remember or know that they have experienced it, they are unaware of it and they're still carrying with a lot of blockages. What is your experience in that, working with people?
So my experience is that unfortunately more women did experience direct sexual abuse in some way, form or shape than not. And those that have not, luckily, still have been part of growing in a society that sexual trauma is so common and so prevalent that we actually not even seeing it as or calling it for what it is. And of course, there is also religious, shaming for sexuality, which creates a big dissonance for many, many women. There is the cultural norm of women that explore sexuality in a more open way, that a prostitute whore kind of complex. And there is so much to unpack, which is not only from our own lifetime, but comes through our lineage of mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers and so on, that have been living in this patriarchal society for so many centuries, where sexuality was, again, not celebrated or revered for what it is, but rather been pushed to under closed doors. And there's so much shame involved into this area. And when it comes to the body, there's so much body shame and the objectification, and so much that goes into our relationship with our body, that is the first vessel for exploring sexuality, that also needs to be healed and unpacked. And I think this is really relevant for each and every one of us.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And on that as well, I think the exploration of your own body, that's also something that's there's still a lot of taboo around it, because there's also a lot of shame and blame because you don't do that and you definitely don't speak about it. But we should all explore that, because that's where we know what we like, and yeah, that's also obviously improving the relationship with your partner. But first of all, for yourself, do you have any like comments on that, or like how do you normally work with that?
So I think what we're missing to understand very clearly is that we are born wired for pleasure. This is our wiring. This is part of our physics. The clitoris have more than 8,000 nerve endings dedicated for pleasure. And because of all the religious doctrination and the shame around it, we have kind of pushed that aside. And women that have been even molested and in some way enjoyed it, or women that want to enjoy their sexuality in an open and expressive way, have been really judged by society and by other women, by men. And I think that we need to realize that this is part of our journey in this body on this earth, is that world of our sexuality, which is really when we bring it back into the sacredness. It's really a communion with the divine. This is how the divine is communicating to us. I mean, and an orgasm, it's probably the most highest pleasure possible in the human body. And but it's, of course, it's the peak, maybe it's the highlight, but everything, all that relating with another in an intimate way or with ourselves, this is we all governed by it. So it kind of in the back of our minds, whether we are consciously aware of it or not. And if there are blockages, then it can be directed or expressed in a way that can hurt ourselves or others. And that's why we see in the collective, the sexuality is very mutated, and we can see it in the porn world. We can see it with child trafficking, and of course the rate of rape and molestation and abuse. It's very, very high because this is our life force energy, and if it's not channeled in a beautiful and healthy way, it will find abusive ways to be expressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I learned, it's also about like focusing that life force energy back to yourself again. Because we have been giving a lot away, especially when there is abuse. But I think in general, what you're pointing out in life and in society and how we have been programmed in a way. And once you turn it back inwards, you're on this high, you're on this wave, like of this beautiful energy that already is so sacred, and it's giving you so much more out of life in general, in a way. On the shame, like what I pick up and what I see is that there's a lot of shame, like for women, but also for men still in that. What is your advice in that to break through that, to get rid of these layers and to dive deep into that aspect as well?
Right. So it's definitely a process. And I think that the first step is to realize that where are we coming from? What is our collective just a matrix? Where are we all our starting point, you know, in this world of sexuality? And when we decide to take the responsibility back to our hands and go through that healing journey, then that's a very empowering journey to go through. It's not always easy. Yeah, it's simple. It's very simple. There's no nothing really complicated about it. It's really to embody ourselves and clear trauma that lingers in the body. But it's not an easy process because it means that we meet our own dragons and kind of going a little bit in our own underworld journey. But at the same time, this is where we find our power. This is where we connect back to our divinity, to that essence of the God or goddess that we all have inside, and that allows us to create not only new life, but everything else that we want to create in this life. We always create it with our sexuality, which is our, again, life force energy. So the journey of healing is necessary. We can't avoid it. The way through it is the way through it. And I know that for many people it's very scary, and I understand it can be very overwhelming. And at the same time, it's a lot more painful to get to be stuck and remain stuck in the trauma, however it manifests in one life. And of course, it then spills over to all our relationships and to the way we relate to other and to what we create in the world. So I really a strong believer that when we decide to accept that we have been through our own personal journey, whatever it is, and the collective, as well as the lineage, and we start to unpacking and undoing. It's really not about learning anything new because we've got all the knowledge within us. It's about clearing everything that we have been taking on, which is not true, which is really the conditioning of how we've been growing up. And once we start clearing it up, we remain with the essence of who we really are. So yeah, that's the work that we all here to do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Also described how you're explaining it. I think a lot is also related into letting go, completely letting go when you are with your partner. If it's, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, but I think that's still where there's so many resistance, because that's where the fear kicks in, because you don't know what to expect, or we are ashamed in what can happen. But that's actually where the magic is happening, the moment that you can let go. Um, any comments on that, how for example women can, yeah, be led through that process of letting go more when you are having sex with your partner or intimates?
So I think the first step is to be able to talk about our experiences, about where we are with our sexuality in terms of our personal experience, in terms of what was mirrored from our family, or yeah, anything that relates to our sexuality. I think it's very important to bring it to the open, because once it's in the open, it can be healed, and the partner is really the most the most important support in terms of our healing, right? So it's really our partner that has the capacity to help us uh, heal, to help us move from the trauma into the pleasure, into the openness of that energy that can move freely through us and can rub off to everything else that we do in our life. And I think that once we bring it into normalization, that we can talk about it, that we can share about it, that we are not alone in our experience, men and women alike, because men have also been sexually abused. It's you know, if the statistics is 1 out of 3 women, it's also 1 out of 5 men, and that's huge. And I've been also working with some men, although I work mostly with women, and I find that so many men also have confusion, not enough knowledge, not enough understanding. They don't know how to please a woman, even if they want to. They don't know how to hold that space. They, even if they have the best of intentions, they just haven't been educated about it, or they've got something that blocks them from being completely open. And so it's really both you know, men and women in this journey together to unravel the magic and the sacredness of sexuality. And I think that it's really important to start normalizing it, bring it to the open, talk about it, share about it. Maybe not inside the bed, maybe outside the bed is a better place to discuss it. And and I think that it's really important to understand that shame is the fear of disconnection. And actually, the antidote for that is vulnerability. It is when we authentically speak from our heart is what brings intimacy to a more profound state. So it's actually when we open and we share our intimate experience, and we allow the other a glimpse into our world, then the other can support us better, can understand us better. And you know, it's always in relationship that we get hurt, and it is in relationship that we get healed as well. And so I really believe that our intimate partner is the biggest supporter in our journey. So it's really important to be very transparent about our journey, and the right partner will stick and stay and will be part of that journey, and will be a major catalyst in the healing. And actually, by working together, it will enhance the intimacy and not the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And it was also so beautifully described how you're explaining it. And I think indeed communication is so important. And that's something we all missing in the intimate relationships. And there is the shame, which is actually indeed fear, already kicking in. And to normalize it, um, indeed outside of the bedroom, just with your friends or girlfriends or whatever, that's already such a big step. Because for me personally, that's already not happening enough because the taboo that's still around it. In terms of the communication, right, between the masculine and the feminine, uh, that's also for a lot of women or men even a tricky point to start that conversation, because there's a lot of awkwardness around it, also depending on what relationship you have with your partner, obviously. Do you have any tools or guidelines for that, to open that conversation?
Mm. So first, I suggest to open the conversation outside of the bed. That's really important, because when maybe your partner is turned on, or you in the midst of a sexual activity, it's not the right context to discuss things that are yeah, maybe so hurtful. I mean, not that it's not allowed or not that you can't do it, but I suggest to raise that conversation maybe when you have a nice walk on the beach, or you drink your tea, or you both relax and you both present and attentive, and that's a better start to kick off that conversation. I think that it's important to let the partner know that some things may trigger past memories, or they may trigger some very sore points. And I think it's important for the partner to know that it's not personal, that it is actually not because of them. So they know that, when something like that happens, they can kick into being a support presence without taking things personally, and get blamed for it, or get upset, because that can escalate to a whole unnecessary hurt that can be prevented. And I think that it's really important to set boundaries, very healthy boundaries. So, it's very clear what I am comfortable with and what I'm not comfortable with, and go in a pace that feels comfortable. Because when you cross your boundary, then it's a whole spin into activating that trauma that is already there. So I think it's important to discuss boundaries, and it's okay also to cross some boundaries when the time is right and one feels ready. But it's a process. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be pushed. It cannot be violated, because again, that's the trauma. So I think it's really important to set those boundaries. Those boundaries really can protect one to feel safe within that relationship, and where is the line that from there I'm not feeling at this moment in time comfortable to cross. And yeah, I think that it's also important to talk about what I like, what brings me pleasure. I know that a lot of people feel very shy. They feel a lot of shame again. I think it can be even done in a playful way, in a light way, where you can express, okay, I like that kind of touch, or that feels good. And it's a journey of discovery. It's a journey that it takes time. It might need some space, and I think that communication is really the key to be able to talk about all that is going through. And I also believe that the triggers are actually the roadmap to healing. So in other words, I know from my own experience is that a trigger can come very unexpectedly, and often has nothing to do with the partner. It can be a certain touch, a certain maybe even words that been said, or even a song that been played in the background that brings those memories. And when a trigger comes, I think it's important to communicate it in a way that is very clear and say, look, I just been triggered. Can you give me some space? And because it's been discussed before, it's not a surprise for the partner. The partner can understand, okay, it has nothing to do with me, but at the same time, I can be the support to guide my beloved through it. And yeah, it's a slow process to track back what was the trigger, why triggered, and slowly and gently and yeah, very tentatively work through it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Again, like communication, so important. I so agree with that. What now if you're not able to communicate with your partner about that? Because I think that also happens where there is like, I wouldn't say miscommunication, but that it's more difficult because there's not that understanding, and then we fall back in the fear and just keep it to ourselves. And I think often then we're crossing our own boundaries again. So it's like trauma on trauma. How do we deal with that?
Well, then I really strongly believe in working with a therapist, with somebody that can is not emotionally involved in the relationship and can be a guide to unpack what is there and guide you through how to navigate the trauma. So I think that, yeah, working with another therapist is really key. It's very challenging to work on deep trauma alone. So yeah, it's very advisable to work on trauma in the presence of another. So maybe a therapist, a very good trustworthy friend, or a partner. So one of those options.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yes, I think that's very valid. This is just a question that I have myself already for a while, and I'm very curious how you feel about it. Like what I'm picking up is that people who do have that experience of trauma and remember it, because like you said, I think most of the people, man, female, it doesn't matter, most of us have have trauma in that area, one way or the other. But the people who are aware and who conscious are in that journey of remembering who they truly are and doing the work and the dive deep, they are more likely to end up also embracing that aspect of the sensuality and sexuality from themselves, and therefore in their partners of intimate partners relationships as well. Is that something that you come across as well, that there is like a relationship between that if you start to dive deep and working through certain traumas, you're actually sooner and easier to eventually tap into that sacred energy and bring it back to yourself and that enjoyment and pleasure as well?
Absolutely. You cannot work on yourself and ignore your sexuality. It's a bypass. Again, because it is your life energy. I mean, you can avoid sex. That's absolutely okay. It's a choice. But your sexuality is how you express yourself. It's how you create in this world. It's how you relate to other people. It's how you live your authenticity. It's who you are. So you have to work through your sexuality when you work through yourself, when you work through your spirituality. It's really, I see sexuality and spirituality as undividable. It's a part of the same energy of life. So if you look at nature, everything is sexual. All the animals are sexual, all the plants are sexual. the energy is sexuality. So yeah, absolutely, you have to work on your sexuality when you on that self growth journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And with that as well, what you're saying, like it's so much more. It's that self-love, it's that self-acceptance, it's that self-worth, but it's also bringing back all these beautiful gifts, like your creativity, like how you live life, how you perceive life, how you walk through life. And I think um, especially also for women, but also men, like your sacral chakra and working with that, it's bringing back so much. And it's, for me, it's a journey everyone should be tapping into. So it's beautiful that people like yourself and others, and I as well, like voicing these things more and more, because that's so needed. Much more. Yes. In terms of the authenticity, like for me, that's also really related in stepping into your truth. So especially with trauma, it's like embodying your truth. I always call it, your truth is your medicine, and yeah, embody your ugly truth and make it the truth. Um, how do you see that with working with women and men, also with these type of traumas or other traumas even?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, because to be authentic is to embrace your darker sides. And the truth is that we all, no exception, have the dark sides. And you know, the dark and the light are part of the same energy. It's, we can't divide it. And it's when we learning to love ourselves with our weakness, with our less lovable sides, and to acknowledge that. And you know, that's the process of enlightenment. That's when we illuminate those dark places. And and I think that, you know, we have learned to put on masks to the world, showing a certain kind of accepted personality to be lovable. I mean, it's all comes from the need and the desire to feel loved, to feel belong, to feel connected, to feel part of a family, a tribe, a community. And I think it all comes back to our very primal wounds that we all have, with no exception. This is really actually the basis of my book, is that we all, no matter where we come from the world, have the mother wound and the father wound. In other words, you know, our parents, bless them, I know they try to do their best with what they had, but they've been wounded by their parents, which were wounded by their parents, which grew up in a society that experienced so much trauma, war and terror and killing and burning on the stake and you name it, that it almost feels as it should be. Like, we, you know, that state of living in trauma is so normalized that we actually don't even see it for what it is. And so our parents, you know, being a parent is a very challenging role. I can tell you, I'm a mom of three. It is not an easy journey. And children, by default, they press our buttons. They see our weak points. They see our blind points. They will very clearly point it out. And this is the journey of growth. This is that soul relationship that we have with our children, where we both grow through this parent-child relationship. But parents that have not done work on themselves, that are wounded themselves, it's very, very difficult, almost impossible for them to love the children unconditionally, just for who they are. They always place certain conditions on their love, not even intentionally, but they kind of like, you know, they kind of give the message that I will love you if you behave a certain way, you achieve a certain way, you do what I expect you to do, you follow the family tradition, you follow the religion, you follow something. So what happens is that as children, we already grew up not feeling that unconditional love, that celebration of our authentic being as we are, for the mere existence of us. We already experiencing this love in a very fragmented way, in a way that is expecting us to be a certain way so we will be loved. And that's the core of our wounding. So now our entire life, we are trying to be something or do something or behave a certain way so we will fit into our community or family, or our friends, our partners, our beloveds. We try to create this persona which we think will be then lovable. And this is really what we have to break. We have to break all those illusionary parts of ourselves that we kind of took on board, and really clear all of that, and really dive into the essence of who we are with our magnificence and our talents and our genius, brilliance, and godliness, and humanity, which also have the dark side. So we all have that part as well, all of us, no exception. And to embrace that, and to not be afraid to show that, to not be afraid to share that, and not to try and cover it up or paint it in other colors and present it in a nice wrapped gift to the world, because this is unauthentic. And so it's really about breaking through all those illusionary parts of self.
Yeah. I love so much what you just said, and that so resonates with me. I always say, like, embracing all aspects of self, so the dark side and the light, because there's always going to be dark when there's light as well. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. Um, in terms of the darkness and the light, we also all carry the masculine and the feminine energy. And that should also be imbalanced. And the society that we grew up in, especially as women, we have been pushed to lead more from the masculine energy instead of the feminine energy and that flow. And now I see that I mean, it's coming back. The divine feminine is taking over again, which is good, and the divine and the masculine as well in that aspect. So what's your take on that, in the masculine and feminine energy, and to balance that, because that should be in all of us in balance too?
So my take on that is that we actually have the Holy Trinity within. So it's the divine masculine, divine feminine, and the child, the divine child. So in all of us also lives that child that has been born pure, innocent, joyful, curious, adventurous, ready to explore the world. And of course it's that triangle of the feminine and the masculine, and it's the balance and the cooperation between the masculine and the feminine that creates life and creates everything else that we're doing. So the masculine energy is the linear energy. It's the energy of doing, providing, planning, protecting, directing, governing. It's very goal orientated. It's the thought. And the feminine energy is the circular energy, which is creative, intentive. It's envisioning. It's intuitive. It's all of that. It's the feeling, it's the beingness, and it really takes the two together to create anything we want to create. You cannot only live the one. It really needs the merging of the two. And the fact is that they are married. The question is, how do they relate to each other, right? So, you know, you cannot choose one over the other. You cannot only operate from your logical thinking mind. You cannot also only operate from your intuitive creative mind. You really need the merging of the two to create everything, and also to mother and father that inner child within. So together as the Trinity, you can be a whole person that is in its totality, that can go out there and shine.
Yes, I love the fact how you make this triangle and bringing in the inner child, because for me that's something that we really truly missing, like the playfulness and the joy of the child. And I think that should come to the surface so much more often, because we should be jumping and we should be laughing and running in the fields and on the beach, and that playfulness, we should be embracing that much more. So I think this is beautiful to actually approach it like that. Thank you again. Yeah, amazing. I think one last question to round this beautiful conversation off. In terms of where we with the collective, there's a lot of chaos around us. The divine feminine is definitely rising. To me, the divine masculine is also rising and embracing more aspects. So that's a beautiful thing which is happening. Um, what would you like to say on that, like with the chaos, to bring it back to us, and what role we can play as women or as a man to embrace these aspects more in the chaotic times that we are in right now?
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment we are in a transition stage where we are exiting the patriarchal era, and we really enter in the heart chakra of the collective. So we moved from the solar plexus, which was very masculine orientated, into the heart space where the masculine and the feminine meet together. And I really emphasize about the importance of the masculine and feminine together. So it's not only the feminine that is rising, it's also the masculine that is rising to meet the feminine, because the feminine without the masculine is chaotic. It needs the structure of the masculine to hold that chaotic energy so it can transform into creation. And I feel that definitely women are awakening more and more, because women have been oppressed and suppressed through all these times. And the awakening of women is what the Dalai Lama said, that it's the Western woman that will create the transformation in this world. So I think that it's really the time for women to shine as whole beings with their masculine and feminine energy activated, and yeah, and lead the way to a new era.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes, absolutely in agreement there. um, how can we follow you? Where can we find you online? If people want to know more about you.
Yeah, so my website is a good place. It's nunaisi.com. So it's nunaisi.com. And I'm mostly on Facebook. I've got the group Sacred Feminine Rising. So you're welcome to tap into that. And my page, Nunaisi, Empowering Awakening Consciousness.
Thank you. Thank you. I will also put the links underneath this interview for people to find you online. Thank you so much for your time and for this lovely conversation and all your insights and knowledge. I really, really love it. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation, and all the best.
Thank you.